on a $3,000 return ticket that they bought from Sydney to London, let's say, for them to try and get back on the same airline using the same ticket, which was changeable with a change fee, the difference in fares between the day that they were planning to go and the day that we needed to get them back to Australia sometimes was in excess of $5,000 per passenger.
Anyone who's spent time in the tourist hotspots of Europe, Southeast Asia, the Americas or further afield will probably have met an Australian tourist or two. Always up for sharing a beer, a traveller's tale or a sightseeing recommendation, the famed Aussie backpacker is usually a great ambassador for their homeland. But once you look at the many hurdles Australians face when travelling abroad, there's only one word that will suffice: struth. Because Aussies are hit on multiple fronts when it comes to booking that big trip. Of course, there's geography. Australia's relative isolation means even nearby destinations such as Bali or New Zealand involve multiple hours of flying time. Europe or the Americas, meanwhile, are as long haul gets, and flight prices certainly reflect that. And it's not much better domestically. Although low-cost airlines exist down under, the market lacks the competition that drives down prices in the UK or elsewhere. Case in point, a return flight from Sydney to Perth can easily set you back up to 1,000 Australian dollars, a pretty penny in a country where overland travel between the east and west coast is a multi-day undertaking. Meanwhile, Australia has yet to bring in the air passenger protections that those in the EU or the UK have come to expect. With a lack of standardisation, airlines offer varying levels of compensation, and while the Australian consumer law applies, there are no aviation-specific rules ensuring a minimum amount or time frame for payouts. So, why are Aussies getting such a bad deal when it comes to travel? What can they do to mitigate the risk to their travel investments? And where do opportunities lie for businesses in travel tech and beyond? My name's Jack, and you're listening to Battleface Uncharted, brought to you by Battleface Travel Insurance. We speak to some of the travel industry's leading figures to discover the trends you need to know about. When it comes to Australians getting away, Battleface's Managing Director for Australia and New Zealand, Matt McLellan, certainly knows his stuff. Matt has 20 years of experience in travel technology and distribution, including running the Asia Pacific business for airline e-commerce platform Navitaire, before moving into travel insurance and insurance distribution for Australia and New Zealand with global insurer Chubb. So, Matt, why are flights so expensive in Australia?
Well, there's a number of reasons. I think the most important ones at the moment are really around capacity and competition. So we're still ramping back up into pre-COVID levels in terms of airline capacity, both domestically and also for flights to and from Australia. So the planes are pretty full, and airlines can really charge those higher prices. It's really supply and demand as far as that's concerned. I think we're starting to see a little bit more capacity come online. There's a bit of a controversy here locally in Australia around granting more access to Qatar Airways to the Australian market. Some of that was sort of foiled by the government, who decided that they weren't going to grant them additional flying rights. And consumer groups and travel agency organisations obviously could see that would maintain higher fares for longer. But I think in terms of competition, we really don't have any true LCCs in Australia domestically. So we've had a couple of startups over the years. So Tiger Air was absorbed into Virgin a few years ago. Jetstar started as part of Qantas to address Virgin when Virgin was a low-cost airline. So Virgin moved up into a more sort of mid-tier or full-service airline. And startups like Bonza, which just started flying last year, they're really not competing head-to-head with the major airlines in Australia. So they're looking at very niche leisure travel markets, like going to the Gold Coast and what have you. we've got other smaller players like Regional Express who's just started flying between Sydney and Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane and Brisbane and Melbourne. They're taking a little bit of a bite, but again, only a small part of the overall market. So it's really a factor of how many people are looking for flights at the moment and how much capacity is available in the marketplace.
Got you. And I mean, maybe anecdotally, do you find that the cost of travel that Australians face impact their willingness to take overseas trips, maybe the kind of frequencies that they would be considering taking overseas trips?
Yeah, look, I guess Economics 101 tells us that would definitely be the case. And certainly for some particular market segments, I think they would be affected by the high price of travel. But I guess those signals are really being masked somewhat by, the amount of ramp up that we've had, the so-called revenge travel. So we've got a lot of latent demand after a couple of years of virtually no overseas travel for Australians. So a lot of people have saved up their pennies and we're going to travel come hell or high water. And we're still in that ramp up mode. So, based on the departure data that we see from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, we're still seeing month on month growth out of Australia for departures. But we're still well below the 2019 levels before COVID became a factor.
That's interesting. So, I mean, are you seeing then, as kind of travel returns to, pre-COVID levels, are people looking at taking bigger trips that they missed out on, and are they more cautious in the way that they travel now?
Yeah, when we look at the data, we're not seeing a huge change in the types of trips. I think that the destinations and durations really haven't changed enormously. I think travelers' awareness about things that could potentially go wrong on a trip are definitely much more heightened post-COVID. And I think that Australia's always been a fairly mature market when it comes to understanding the need for travel insurance. And I think just post-COVID, not just the actual medical issues associated with COVID, but with the disruption associated with the ramping back up of the aviation sector in particular, people just realise that there's things out of their control that may go wrong on a trip, and travel insurance is the best way for them to mitigate those kind of risks.
Yeah, you mentioned risks there, and obviously, it's surprising to me that a country like Australia, still doesn't have the consumer protections on flights that we're, so accustomed to, I guess, in the UK or the EU. Kind of what's the holdup here, Matt?
Well, I think the airlines have done a great job of hosing it down in Australia. I think they're citing, even higher fares if these programs were rolled out, and obviously those costs being passed on to passengers. I think in the UK and the EU, you probably faced a lot of those same arguments before it was rolled out over there. And as far as I can see, the aviation sector in that part of the world is still relatively strong. Interestingly, like globally, battleface is a partnership with AirHelp. That's an organisation that specialises in claiming compensation on behalf of disrupted passengers that are travelling into or out of the EU or within the EU. I'd love to be in a position to sort of offer those sort of services in Australia as well. I think it's something that definitely starting to become front of mind in Australia. And we've had some recent controversy around one of the major airlines here in Australia offering or cancelling flights and continuing to sell fares on those flights that they've already cancelled. So really just inconveniencing people and not really valuing that inconvenience. And I think the protections that we see in the EU really make airlines stop and think before they disrupt their customers, that there's a financial cost to that. Mm-hmm. But really it's in the customer's best interest. So I think it's an idea whose time has come in Australia as well.
Matt, I mean, traditionally, travel insurance has followed a bit of a, one size fits all model in Australia. What kind of problems has that created?
Well, I think some of the key issues really around costs. I mean, the problem with one size fits all is that there's a typically there's a large number of coverages and benefit levels which are packaged together, which may not really be that applicable to the customer. So what we tend to see is people, paying for cover that they don't really need. And that's something that we've really tried to address at Battleface with the modularity that we've created within our product framework. So we're really trying to make customers more educated about the insurance and the coverage that they require, and then selecting those benefits at an adequate level for their intended trip. So they're only really paying for what they need.
Got you. Okay. So, I mean, look, let's talk in terms of like concrete examples, maybe. I mean, when you're talking about a holiday to Europe or North America, where there's a serious investment of money in, flights, accommodation, maybe activities you have booked, how can Australian travelers protect that investment?
Well, I think the key thing is really, as soon as you start spending money on your trip, buying things which are ultimately non-refundable, you should be really taking insurance at that time. I think probably the one area that Australians probably don't understand as well as they could is that effectively their travel insurance policy covers them from the time that they purchase the policy through the time that they leave for pre-trip cancellation, as well as on trip. So most people are focused about what happens on trip. But if you have an accident leading up to a $20,000 non-refundable trip, that means that you can't go on that trip unless you've got insurance. You're not going to see that money again. So I think really making sure that you purchase travel insurance as soon as you start incurring travel costs is fairly critical. The other thing that I'd sort of add, and this is based on our experience for this summer, that some of the things that may happen on your trip may be unforeseeable, and thinking about particularly this last European summer, we helped a number of our insureds with assistance. They got sick and were no longer fit to fly, so they needed to change their return journey. And on a $3,000 return ticket that they bought from Sydney to London, let's say, for them to try and get back on the same airline using the same ticket, which was changeable with a change fee, the difference in fares between the day that they were planning to go and the day that we needed to get them back to Australia sometimes was in excess of $5,000 per passenger. And we saw this repeatedly during the European summer. So this is again a factor of how full the flights are and how little capacity there is, that the airlines are just charging the full fare price for anyone who needs to make a last minute change. And often that can be for reasons outside of your control, like you've got sick, you've had an accident, or that your transportation has been delayed. And that's really where insurance kicks in. So without insurance, that's really on the individual traveler.
So Matt, I guess the key question is, what is Battleface offering here that its competitors aren't?
Yeah, well, I think for us, the feedback that we're getting of partners is they really love the flexibility. So our pricing approach is the modularity that we bring to the market is obviously a key thing for them to help them sell. It's incredible to watch the light goes on when you're talking to a partner and they kind of understand how our API works, and that they can deliver very targeted product to a particular customer based on what they know about their trip and where they're going, and serve them the most appropriate policy. So they love that flexibility. It's quick to market. Our tech platform makes it really easy. So everything's API enabled. We can set up partners in hours really, and have them get access to our API. They can use our direct to consumer path if they want to do something very quick to market, but they can also then take the time to build out their own customer journeys. So we're seeing a number of our partners actually launch using our co-branded direct consumer journey and then building out their own customer journey. So they're seeing that being quick to market, the tech platform's great and easy to interface with, gives them the ultimate flexibility. And I think for our size, one of the things that's really unusual for battleface, I think globally, is as a startup that we do all of our own operation services. So we've got our own services platform for assistance, claims, and customer service. That's really unusual. In this business, typically companies start off as an MGA and use third-party administrators for claims, assistance, and sometimes customer service. We've taken it all in-house. There's just one throat to choke, and our partners really like that. And the fact that we were born out of an assistance company means that we do those services better than most. And I think the other thing we do in the Australian market is we're bringing in new capital here. So some of the arrangements we have with reinsurers globally has allowed us to price risk fairly aggressively in this marketplace, which has typically had a number of large players that are churning over the same business. So we've surprised a few potential partners with some of the pricing that we're able to offer on their programs once they come and talk to us, and we get down into the details of their program.
Matt, you've talked about partnerships, but obviously battleface is also offering a direct-to-consumer product. Can you explain a little more about how those two things fit together?
Yeah, well, Jack, effectively our direct-to-consumer path is really our test and learn environment. It's a great tool to give to our partners, just to give them an idea of how their customer journey could look, and how policies hang together and pull together. So we accept, though, that we're not the world's best marketers, and really our partners are. And so really our emphasis in this market and for battleface globally is really being the brand behind the brand. So empowering our partnerships and making sure that they've got the tools they need to be successful in their markets. I will say that one thing that I do talk to our partners about that they complain with other providers is that there's a different price on the provider's direct-to-consumer website than there is that the partner has access to. So in battleface we're very, very concerned to look after our partners and make sure that there's no channel conflict. The pricing is exactly the same on the direct-to-consumer as we give to our partners, and they're free to sort of discount that or move those prices around, but everyone gets access to the same pricing in battleface.
Finally, Matt, then with travel prices so high, are we going to continue to see the familiar sight of the Australian working in a bar in London or volunteering in Southeast Asia in the numbers that we would have expected to see before?
Absolutely. I think you'll still be hearing plenty of Aussie accents in London, Jack. Look, it's still very much a rite of passage in Australia. I'm just spent the weekend chatting to my 20-year-old daughter who's about to embark on a winter tour of Europe, and is looking at Eurail options. And that takes me back to when I was doing my own backpacking, and really things haven't changed. It's a lot easier with all of the technology and all of the assistance that they can get as part of that, and the constant communication that they have both with home but also with destination information and what have you. But essentially it's the same journey. It's exposing yourself to other cultures and other places in the world, and I don't think Australians are ever going to tire of that. So we'll be around for some time to come, Jack.
You've been listening to Battleface Uncharted, brought to you by Battleface Travel Insurance.